Russia has had a busy 24 hours. Witness the aftermath of a missile attack on a civilian convoy of Ukrainians. This was a fragmentation bomb designed to cause mass casualties. The cars had assembled at a well-known meeting place for convoys. They were heading into Russian-occupied territory in unusually large numbers. Because of the annexation, many were afraid that this might be their last chance to cross the front line. Some had come to return home, some to collect relatives, others to deliver aid. But 26 of them didn't make it and dozens were wounded. This surely is what a war crime looks like. At the same time, in a parallel universe of Kremlin pomp, circumstance and deference, the master of chaos came to celebrate what amounts to a brazen act of geopolitical theft. The annexation of 4 partially occupied provinces of Ukraine, roughly the size of England, sealed with a sham referendum, a cluster of quivering knuckles, and shouts of Russia.
The authorities in Kiev today should treat the free will of the people with respect and no other way. That's the only path to peace. We will defend our land using all forces and means at our disposal, and will do everything we can to protect the security of our people. That's the great liberating mission of our people.
And what about them? Are they with him or against him? Will they bite their tongue? Then a laundry list of phobias and grievances against the West, wrapped in a civilizational struggle.
The destruction of Western control, which has started, is irreversible. I repeat it again, it won't be like it used to be anymore. The battlefield where we were brought by fate and history is a battlefield for our nation, for the greater historical Russia.
An hour later in Kiev, with no pomp but plenty of circumstance, President Zelenskyy signed a fast-track application for NATO membership, the one thing that Mr. Putin had originally wanted to avoid.
Today, Ukraine is applying to make it de jure, under a procedure consistent with our significance for the protection of our entire community, under an accelerated procedure. We know it's possible. We have seen Finland and Sweden start accession to the alliance this year without a membership action plan.
Up the road from where he was speaking, the trophies of war, a reminder of Russia's failures so far. But the fear has always been that those failures would drive President Putin to more extreme options, including nuclear ones. We spoke to the deputy head of Ukraine's military intelligence. When he talks about a nuclear threat, right, how seriously do you take that here?
It's very serious. Yes, really. Why? Because it's a threat not only for us, it's a threat for the European country, for our neighboring countries, and for the world.
And have you seen any intelligence that indicates that he is planning to do such a thing, that he's getting ready?
No, today we don't see clear evidences of such activity.
But you're looking out for it?
But,
obviously.
Yeah, we're monitoring the situation every day, every night, concerning the development situation in possible preparation for such strike.
Do you think he'll do it? What do you reckon?
Maybe.
Time perhaps to head underground. Kiev has one of the world's deepest metro systems. These stations were meant to double up as fallout shelters at the height of the Cold War. The steel arch hides doors that slam shut in case of an attack. Then it was America. Now it's Russia. A Russia that tonight turned Moscow's Red Square into a frothing arena of flags and fever. Russia, we will win for sure, the compere shouts. But the thousands of Russians who have fled the country this week may disagree. And what is there to celebrate on a day when the world has inched further towards an abyss that was unthinkable this time last year? Now, the geopolitics here stems from the failures and successes on the battlefield. And tonight, Russian troops have reportedly are surrounded by Ukrainian troops in the strategic northeastern city of Liman. It is the latest in a series of Ukrainian successes which began with the retaking of the town of Balaklia almost a month ago. Lindsay Hilsum has been speaking to some of the men who spearheaded the advance, and she's now in Kharkiv. Lindsay.
Matt, this is another potential disaster for the Russians on the battlefield, and that's really important. You know, tonight, Denis Pushilin, he's the head of the Donetsk People's Republic, you know, the pro-Russian state that is apparently part of Russia now. He said the Ukrainian military is doing everything it can to spoil our celebrations. Well, I think that most Ukrainians would say, sorry about that. It's really significant because Liman is a garrison town. There are up to 5,000 Russian troops there. President Putin has told his troops they may not retreat. And they haven't retreated, apparently. Apparently, from the information we have, they're staying there. President Zelenskyy of Ukraine has said any Russian forces who lay down their weapons and surrender will be treated well. They'll be treated kindly. This may be a test of that. This war, we've mainly seen it being about artillery, precision artillery that the Americans have given the Ukrainians. But, you know, it's also been about a much more humble weapon, as I've been finding out, as I spent some time with troops with a T-72 Russian-era tank battalion. A 20th century weapon deployed in a 21st century war. But while the Russians have abandoned more than 1,000 tanks, Ukraine's armoured battalions are key to their battlefield success.
Intelligence, manoeuvrability, as many movements as possible. As long as you're still, you're a target. But if you act, move forward, back, right, left, shoot back, change positions, it will save you.
Changing a track is trickier than changing a tyre. Tanks need a lot of maintenance and spare parts, so Ukrainian soldiers have been cannibalizing abandoned Russian tanks. The Ukrainians have the same Soviet-era tanks as the Russians. The difference is how they use them. They're not waiting for orders to come down the chain of command, but are able to make decisions according to what's going on the battlefield. That's one reason they were able to punch through in September's counteroffensive. The Ukrainian military have released pictures of their first attempt to take the town of Balaklia in August, including the rescue, by tank, of injured soldiers.
We got blown up by mines and pulled each other out of the battlefield. We didn't succeed that time. There were a lot of mines, but people are alive, thank God, and the tanks survived. We repaired them and went on the attack again.
On September the 6th, Ukrainian forces advanced into Balaklia on two fronts, tanks spearheading the infantry movement. They captured or destroyed 6 Russian tanks. This was the start of the successful counteroffensive, which continues today with the encirclement of Russian forces in the strategically important city of Liman. The 59-year-old battalion commander is happy to take credit.
If it weren't for tank battalions, it wouldn't have happened, because the main role of tanks is firepower, and the infantry feels more confident because they have the support of tanks. Without tanks, it's difficult to advance.
Good morning, we are from Ukraine, they painted on the gun. The Russians retreated from Balaklia, but left a fatal legacy.
If you step away from the road, the mine, or mine of different grenade, so you must have very good eyes to see them, and what we know that a lot of them we even don't see with metal detector. Do you understand me? It's plastic, but we don't see him, but injuries from them is catastrophic.
The Ukrainian counteroffensive has forced a Russian retreat in much of the northeast. But its very success is what triggered President Putin's decision to annex part of Ukraine. The fear now is that he'll escalate the war with even more deadly weapons.
Lindsay Hilsum reporting. Now, Britain has ramped up sanctions against Russia in response to President Putin's illegal annexation of parts of Ukraine. The Russian ambassador in London was summoned to the Foreign Office to be told of the UK sanctions in the strongest possible terms. Well, joining me now from Washington is Donald Jensen, Director of Russia and Strategic Stability at the US Institute of Peace, and he used to work for the US State Department. Thanks very much for coming back on the program. How big a day was today in the wider context?
Well, I would say it is a big day, but it's also a turning point. Having witnessed the failure of his army in Ukraine, Putin, who's shown no signs of backing down, has got to come up with a new strategy, and that is to annex illegally the parts of Ukraine which they still hold, in some cases very tenuously, and then let the West guess at his intentions. And that could be a nuclear escalation, it could be something else, but now that he says he has those regions, he can claim that Ukraine is now attacking Russia directly, hoping that it will rally his domestic audience, and it might, hoping it might cause some doubts in the West, which is much more unlikely.
But what it did do immediately was to prompt President Zelenskyy to apply for NATO membership on the fast track, rather like Sweden and Finland. Jens Stoltenberg, the head of NATO, said today that that wasn't going to happen anytime soon. But what do you think the prospects of Ukraine actually joining are?
I think the prospects of Ukraine joining the alliance are actually very slim, certainly over the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years. They not only have to finish the war, they've got to comply with other NATO requirements. But I think it should be kept in mind. There's a very, very vigorous debate about how to fortify Ukraine against future Russian aggression. The Ukrainians are exploring a lot of alternatives, being sort of a Eastern European Israel, for example. So it's no longer just alliance membership or not, it's how does Ukraine best protect its future? And in that, I would add, the alliance members, the NATO members, have been very helpful and rendered a lot of support.
Because if Ukraine were to join NATO sometime soon, what would happen to the nature of this conflict then? Would Russia then say, well, this is, NATO against us, we're into a completely different kind of global conflict?
Well, they say that already. The application today was really more symbolic. It's an assertion of Ukraine's continuing interest in joining. As you know, Russia is already claiming the alliance as a threat, and that's been increased in its rhetoric lately. So Ukraine is not going to be in NATO anytime soon. There are NATO members who don't want Ukraine in NATO. But this is a signal of their continued interest. Russia, again, looks at this and says, Ukraine is going to the West. We're not going to lose it. So this is certainly going to probably stoke tensions even more than they already are.
The reason why Russia has sort of fast-tracked its annexation of these territories in Ukraine, the reason why they announced the mass mobilization of soldiers last week is because they were doing so badly on the battlefield. So if they have further failures on the battlefield in Ukraine, does that push them into an even more extreme corner?
I know what that extreme corner you're alluding to. I think it probably does. But even the use of nuclear weapons could come in a variety of forms. It can be threats. It can be detonations in the air. The yield can be controlled. But I don't think, as your interviewer said a few minutes ago, I don't think we're there yet. To be honest, Putin could even use the annexation as an excuse for a pause in the fighting as the winter comes, as he seeks to build up his own military with the mobilized conscripts the last couple of weeks.
Right. Now, at the weekend, Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor to President Biden, said the Russians had been told directly and privately that if there was to be a nuclear strike, the response from Washington would be catastrophic. What do you think they had in mind?
Well, I think that's been the cocktail party topic all week here in Washington. I don't know what they have in mind, but there are several things that
cocktail party.
Do. A cocktail party conversation all week. No one knows. And I think it's not likely to be nuclear. It's not, this is just my own assessment. It's not likely to be nuclear. It's not likely to be, frankly, an attack on Russia per se. But you could do a lot of things. You could take out the Black Sea Fleet. You could attack Russian units inside Ukraine that release the weapons. There are a number of things you could do that would send the message to Moscow. No one knows what that was. I'm certain that Putin took it very seriously. But again, there's a value to have strategic ambiguity in situations like this.
Indeed. David Jensen, thank you very much indeed for joining us from Washington.